Lance Luce on the Barton organ today. Welcome, everyone, to the Penny Stamps Distinguished Speakers. Oh, wow. Ooh. See, I don't even need this mic, really. Welcome, everyone, and I'm going to tell you once again, because we had Lance Luce on the Barton organ today. Today, we are going to take a look at street art with Wynwood Walls director Jessica Goldman Shrebnick, and artist Tristan Eaton with some roots in Michigan, and Kashink, who has flown in from Paris. I want to thank our partners for their support of today's program, the Institute for the Humanities, Chelsea's River Gallery, and Michigan Radio 91.7 FM. As evidence of the rising tide of fascination and respect for street art, or which sometimes used to be referred to as graffiti, but it's actually not, I must alert you to the panoply of opportunities to engage with it in our fair metro area right now. Currently on view at the DIA on Woodward in Detroit, street artist Caledonia Curry, known as Swoon, also, incidentally, a Wynwood Walls regular artist, has installed a 400-pound, 20-foot-tall installation titled Thalassa in the Woodward lobby, which will be on view through March, so you should get down and see that. This installation also coincides with a community mural project that Swoon's been part of in Detroit's Jefferson-Chalmers district, where she also worked with a number of local artists. And a related exhibition, which opens tomorrow evening, called Heidelbergology, which is a 30-year photo retrospective of the Heidelberg Project at Post Tab Gallery inside the Number House on Heidelberg Street. This presents a study of the 30-year transformation of Heidelberg Street, celebrating the life and works of Detroit artist Tyree Guyton. So that's tomorrow evening and ongoing after that. Finally, right here in Ann Arbor, our own dear and faithful partner, the Institute for the Humanities, is embarking on an international graffiti project, which includes commissions of work by Olga Alexopoulos from Greece, whose work now graces the Panera building at the corner of North U and Thayer, so you should go look at that. That happened recently. And currently is hosting visiting artist Cacao Rocks, who is painting currently on the corner of Washington and Thayer. And still to come, next month from Iran, they will host Mehdi Gadyanlu. So, lots happening in street art to be consumed. Please remember to turn off your cell phones. We are going to have a regular Q&A today in the theater, meaning that we have microphones at the end of the aisles here and here. So when the moment for questions comes, please line yourselves up at these two microphones, and we will commence with a Q&A. The run of program today is a little bit different. Actually, we've never quite done a program like this at Penny Stamps because we have 3 presenters, and each presenter is going to present individually, taking the stage solo. And we will begin with Jessica, and then we will have Tristan, and then we will have Kashink. And Jessica is going to introduce each of the artists in turn, and I will give you a little background on Jessica. Jessica Goldman Shrebnick is the CEO of Goldman Properties, the award-winning company which reimagines, reconstructs, and transforms declining urban districts into thriving global destinations, where among many things, she oversees Miami's emerging Wynwood Arts District, including Wynwood Walls, the highly acclaimed outdoor street art museum. In July 2015, Jessica founded Goldman Global Arts to conceptualize and produce impactful, thought-provoking creative projects for all variety of organizations and locales. Its first project just recently completed with the transformation of Miami's Hard Rock Stadium, home of the Miami Dolphins. Jessica has received numerous accolades, including being named a top 100 power leader and receiving the prestigious Key to the City of Miami, and as a finalist for the Urban Land Institute's Global Award of Excellence for her Wynwood Walls project. Her efforts in Wynwood have led to Vogue and Forbes magazines listing the area as one of the coolest neighborhoods in the world, and a recent Huffington Post article calling Miami the new center of arts in America. So, to tell us more about that, please welcome Jessica Goldman Shrebnick.
Well, hello. I am really, really excited to be here, really happy to be here. And so it's kind of hard to see everybody, but I'm excited to have a whole house full of people that love and appreciate art the way I do. So I'm going to take a little bit of time, and I'm going to talk to you about the Wynwood Walls. I'm going to talk to you about art. I'm going to talk to you about the world of art and what's happening in the world. And I wanted to start by, hold on, wait, which way? No, there we go. Not working. Hold on. Okay, there we go. So the whole theme for my talk today is art as an ignition for change. And so I had to start first to talk about Penny, because it is my actual distinguished honor to be friends with penny stamps. And no one is more generous than penny stamps. There is no one that supports education and creative thinking like penny stamps. And how lucky all of you are that you have such an incredible benefactor, someone who is deeply passionate about making a difference. And so I thank Penny from the bottom of my heart for inviting me here today. So I can't talk about what I do without talking about where I come from. This is my mom and dad. And my dad, Tony, my mom, Janet, they started our company with the money that they got as wedding presents, and they bought their first property. And so when I think about my parents, I think about the kinds of people that they are. And they are risk takers, and they are entrepreneurial at heart. My mom started her own business, and my dad was 24 years old when he started Goldman Properties. And so I wouldn't be who I am, and we wouldn't be doing the kinds of things that we do if it weren't for my parents. And so I want to give you a little bit of a history. I'm going to actually take this, and I'm going to move a little bit. I wanted to give you a little bit of history about Goldman Properties. So we started in 1968 with one property, and we are neighborhood revitalizers. So we go into neighborhoods very early on, like Soho in the 1970s, Miami Beach in the 1980s, Center City, Philadelphia in the 90s, Wall Street in the 90s, and we came to an area called Wynwood in about 2005. And so what we do is we buy critical mass of real estate, and that is the way we effectuate change. We go into neighborhoods that are hopeless, that are crime-ridden, that are dilapidated, and we see what these neighborhoods could be as opposed to what they are. And that takes a mindset. That takes a very optimistic mindset. And so Wynwood is a very, very interesting kind of an example. And so what I thought I would do is I would show you what it is that appeals to us. So this is Soho in the 1970s. Hold on. Okay, this is Miami Beach in the 1980s. This was considered heaven's waiting room. This was crack houses and old people. And this was very typical of the properties that we would find. This was Philadelphia. This was Wynwood. Nobody on the streets, no walking, no windows. You couldn't see what was happening inside. And I'll talk more about Wynwood as we go along, but this is what Green Street is today, Soho, one of the most iconic, important streets in the world. This is one of our projects in Miami Beach. This is a parking garage. And so we tried to use creativity in everything that we do and how we imagine different things. And so whether it's architectural elements, like we used the facade of this building, and we kept the facade, and then we kind of integrated all this foliage around it to kind of hide what's typically considered kind of ugly and not interesting architecture. And so this is Philadelphia. And we use art to kind of create that surprise and to create interest. And this is a beautiful piece by Howe and Nazem. This is Houston and Bowery. This is one of the most wonderful of what I get to do every day, and I get to curate this wall. This wall is one of the most important public art walls in the world. It is, from the standpoint of artists, it's kind of like getting an invite to paint on this wall is kind of like getting an Academy Award. And We curate it 3 times a year, and we invite international artists, national artists, and New York-based artists, and they get to have their piece on the wall for 3 to 4 months, and it's seen by millions and millions of people. And we've been doing that for about 10 years now. Hold on, there we go. So, sorry for the grainy picture, but that's actually my dad back there. And I love this picture. We took it from a video that we did. I love this picture because this was at the very, very beginning of Wynwood. And my dad kind of stood in the middle of the street, and he said, this is going to be the center for the creative class. This is going to be kind of the epitome, all of the lessons that we had learned over the course of time in developing all of these neighborhoods. We were going to infuse that into Wynwood and really kind of show everybody what really true, impactful neighborhood revitalization can be about. And so, having what I've learned, and I've learned many, many things from my parents over the years, and I had the great benefit of working with my dad for 15 years. We shared a partner's desk, and what I've learned is that great ideas can have ripple effects all over the world. And more every day I'm seeing how Wynwood is really having deep ripple effects all over the world. And so we started with this project. This is called the Wynwood Walls, which is one of the reasons why you're all here. And I would say by a show of hands who's been to Wynwood, so actually I will, by a show of hands who's been to Wynwood. All right, some of you. I will tell you that put it on your bucket list. It is an amazing, creative, incredible place, unlike anything I've ever seen anywhere in the world. And so these were the backs of all of our buildings. Wynwood was an industrial neighborhood, single-story neighborhood, and what we did was we invited the greatest street artists in the world to come paint. And so for those of you that know street art in that world, you'll see Kenny Scharf, you'll see Howen Nazem, you will see Pose and Os Gemios and Days and Invader and Logan Hicks and Shepard Fairey and Futura. I mean, that's some serious artistic firepower. And so, but one of the most important things, and one of the lessons I've learned over time, is that a great idea must have equally superior execution in order to be highly effective. And if you don't have superior execution, then all you have is a daydream. So you can have lots of great ideas, but you have to be able to execute on those ideas. And so a great idea can also change a mindset. And so this is a little bit of an overview of the Wynwood Walls. We have 40 murals, outdoor murals. This is open to the public. It's free of charge. And the murals are 100 feet long and 60 feet long. And so it's really everywhere. And so you can see how these were the backs of all of our buildings. And we just, we kind of took space and we looked at it differently. My dad used to say that it's like looking at a Rubik's Cube. If you can, you can keep twisting it and you will find an answer. There is always an answer to a solution, to a problem. And so what we did here was this became the epicenter of the neighborhood, when this was a neighborhood where people had to get into a car to come to this neighborhood. This was not a pedestrian neighborhood. And Miami, for those of you that know Miami, was a very vehicular city. And so we are New York City people. I was born and raised in New York City, and we love to walk. And so this was really the neighborhood, that this was a perfect solution to a pedestrian neighborhood. And the challenge was, how do you get people on the streets? And so the Wynwood Walls was part of that solution. And so this is another kind of aerial view. This is a recent addition to the Wynwood Walls, and you'll see this is a piece, actually I have here. This is a beautiful piece by Case from Germany. This is a piece by Peachy and Avo. And here's like the amazing thing about kind of the change in the world and social media. People ask me all the time, like, do you travel the world looking for artists? And the truth is when you have a handheld device, you have access to everything happening all over the world. And Instagram is spectacular for research and development. And so I found Peachy and Avo on the internet. I found them on Instagram, and I'd seen what they were doing in other parts of the world. They were painting shipping containers. They'd never been to the United States before, and I called them up and I said, I need you to come to the United States, and I need you to paint something for me in Wynwood. And I brought in the shipping containers, and this is the piece that they did. You can't see the whole thing here, but it's pretty spectacular. And by the way, from nothing, from nobody coming to Wynwood, we get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people through the Wynwood Walls every year. And even on one night, we will have anywhere from between 10 and 15,000 people come through the Wynwood Walls from a neighborhood that I wouldn't walk half a block by myself in that neighborhood. And so this is just an example of kind of the feeling and what happens in our beautiful Wynwood Walls. And this is one of my favorite murals here. This is a mural by Shepard Fairey, and Shepard is known for the Obama Hope poster when Obama ran for president the first time. And so Shepard does these murals. He does a lot of different kinds of things, but for us, he did something that was about depicting the greatness in, the great people of, that really personified the creative spirit. And so you can see here, you have the Dalai Lama, and you have Basquiat over here, and over here is Andy Warhol, and back here you can't really see, but this is Martin Luther King and Miles Davis. And so this was 2012, and this right here is my dad. And so my dad, obviously I'm highly, highly biased, but my dad was one of the most extraordinary human beings I have ever known. And just the way he thought, just the way he looked at problems and solutions. And he always told me, don't ever come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. And so my dad had been sick for some time, and he had been in the hospital, and he, on the 15-year anniversary of my employ with our company, he named me the CEO. It was one of the most amazing moments of my life, and certainly to be a second generation and to be a woman was pretty amazing. And 5 days later, he passed away, and so an awful experience. But he's still here. He's still very much a part of who I am, and I still, his lessons have stayed with me for they'll stay with me forever. But, and I'm very lucky, I'm very lucky to be able to have been to be his daughter, and I hope to be the best student that he ever had. And I like to say I went to the Tony Goldman School of Business. And so anyway, so when Shepard was kind of working on this mural and my dad had just passed away, I asked him, I said, would you please consider putting an image of my dad into your mural? So this is the image that we chose, and this is very much what my dad is all about, open arms and welcoming, and just a very, very special person. And so he is the guardian of Wynwood and the guardian of the Wynwood Walls. So what happens when you create something really special, it has effects. It has ripple effects, like what I was mentioning before. And the ripple effects kind of started to bleed out into the neighborhood. And so this was very typical of what you would find in the neighborhood. And the neighborhood was an industrial neighborhood, single story, and not many people living in the neighborhood. There were about 3 galleries in the neighborhood, and a shoe manufacturing business. That was kind of the industry that was there, and it was dying. And so you take something like this, which is a 40,000 square foot building. The rents in this building were about $6 a square foot, and with a little creativity, you turn it into something like this. And so we didn't change the structure of the building at all. We painted it. We used a huge amount of creativity, and we made it something really special. And we created a landmark in the neighborhood. And so when you incorporate creativity into your projects, creative people want to be there. They want to be a part of it. And so that's really what we do. We infuse creativity into everything that we do. And so what are the effects of doing something like this? Well, the effects is that ripple effect, and it's actually blown me away how people have responded and reacted to the Wynwood Walls. And so the effects are massive, and they're everywhere. And I use a couple of different examples to show you just the scale and how things like this change a person's mindset. This is Os Gemios. This is, these are silos in Canada. Or this is Faith 47, an incredible female artist. This is in South Africa. She's from South Africa. This is El Cid. This is one piece, but painted on 50 different buildings. He is an extraordinary young man, and he did a TED Talk, and if you haven't seen it, search him up, El Cid, and watch. And what's wonderful about what I get to do and how I get to curate a lot of this artwork with these extraordinary people is that they all have a story. They all have a point of view, and public art is about changing perception, and it's about starting a conversation. And so that's how our new company kind of came to be. So for a long time, people have said, can you bring Wynwood Walls to Buenos Aires? Can you bring Wynwood Walls to pick a place? It's, everybody wants to have some infusion of creativity into their environments. And so we came up with this idea of creating another company that would infuse art and creativity into life in unexpected ways. And so our first client is Dolphin Stadium. And I thought I'd show you a couple of images of what that looks like and how we're kind of changing the conversation in a stadium. Because a stadium, if you look at the walls of a stadium, it actually looks like a prison. Very, very gray, very uninspiring. What happens on the field is a different story, but in the architecture, it was really not exciting at all. And so what we did is we brought 18 international artists to the stadium, 100,000 gallons of paint, 32,000 spray cans, and we covered 30,000 square feet of wall space. And we're still not finished. We still have more to go. And so this is an artist named 1010. This is AVAF. This is Jen Stark, a local from Miami-based artist, and that's me there. And so, hold on, I'll go back for a second. And so, to me, when you see something that's artistic, you see something that's colorful, it changes you. It changes your energy. And that's what we've tried to do for a long time in all the cities that we have gone into. And it's pretty, we don't go into these cities saying, we're going to make this a global destination. We go into these cities wanting to do things, wanting to improve life, wanting to create businesses and jobs and hope. Because a lot of these neighborhoods that we go into, most people would be frightened of, and we look at them as an opportunity to make a difference in the world. And so I figured, coming here and being asked to speak to such a wonderful group, what did I want to leave you with? What did I want you to kind of walk away with? And I'm a student. I think that for the rest of my life, I will be a student. And I think really great leaders are really great listeners, and they are really great learners. And there are a lot of opportunities to learn from other people, from other places. If you keep your eyes open and you're open to what's around you, and you're in the moment, and you are present. And so I would say that in order to be a really outstanding leader and to do incredible things, it's important to be an example and to lead by example. That's what my father did, that's what my mother does, and that's what I try to do. We have an organization that is about 250 people strong and growing, and so being an example is really, really important. Working hard. I think that for me, one of the measures of success is directly correlated to work ethic. And if you work hard, you can achieve almost anything. People respect you when you work hard. And, my parents always taught me respect is a huge thing in my family. And my dad always did every job. He would bus tables in our restaurants. He would clean the streets in front of our properties. And so every job is important. And so working hard, you'll meet a couple of artists that I love, and I love their work, and I love their spirit. They work really hard, and I think that people don't always appreciate how hard it is to be an artist. And I think that's changing. I hope it's changing. And I think that the Wynwood Walls has been really, really an integral part of creating that change and making that change. And so being passionate, that's another kind of, that's up there in my key characteristics of really strong, good leaders. If you're passionate, people want to work with you. They want to work for you. They want to work with you. And so being passionate is, I love what I do. I wouldn't change it for anything. And it's not work because it's what I love. And so find what it is that you're really, really passionate about and follow that. And it doesn't have to always be in your work world. It can be in your personal world. This is an example. This is a concept. It hasn't been done yet. But give me a little bit of time and I'll make this one happen too. And fearless. So we come up with a theme every year for the Wynwood Walls. And so the first theme was when I was a woman CEO, and for the first time, and I did a theme called Women on the Walls, which I'll talk a little bit about later when I introduce Kashink. I've done other themes called The Art of Collaboration, because I feel like collaborations make us better. They push us to levels that we wouldn't necessarily go to if we were doing things on our own. Another one was The Walls of Change, because I really believe that what you put on a wall can change somebody. It can change how they look at things. And then this year, which is these themes happen at Art Basel. And so Art Basel is a huge, huge art kind of show that takes over all of Miami. And it's one of my favorite weeks of the year. And it's when we change over our walls and the Wynwood Walls. We don't change them all at one time. We'll change 10 per year. And so this year, and I think long and hard about what do I want to express? What do I want people to be left with? And it's 2 words, 3 words, 4 words, and I labor over them long and hard. And so this year, my theme is fearless. 2 words, 2 meanings, because I think we're living in a time where there's too much fear, and fear paralyzes people. Fear creates a barrier between being able to kind of, you want to be able to cross that barrier. You want to be able to do anything that your heart desires. And so I wish for this year that we live in a world that fears less. And I also believe that in order to do that, you have to be fearless. My dad was fearless. And I think in a lot of the things that we do, we try to be fearless. And it's okay to be a little nervous about things, like standing in front of a couple hundred people and talk. But courage is one of the most important components to changing the world. And and these artists, people artists are incredibly, they're incredibly gifted in so many ways, but for me, it's about their fearlessness. And if we can live in a world that we fear less and we are fearless, I mean, that's a pretty amazing thing to do. And I hope that you all take the opportunity at some point in your lifetime to come visit us in Wynwood. And because I think it will change your mind. It will change how you look at art. And a lot of you here are, you're here because you're interested in art, as I am interested in art. And I think that's pretty exceptional. And continue to support it the way Penny Stamps supports it, and continue to really make an effort to make a difference in the world, even in a very little way, whether that is being kind to others. Well, you should always be kind to others. But really make an effort to make a difference in the world, because I don't look at it as, we're changing the world. My dad was very, he always wanted people to know that Tony was here. And so he always wanted to make a mark. And he did that with me, and he did that in the Wynwood Walls, and in all the places that you get to visit that we've made our mark, in Miami Beach and Philadelphia and Soho. And so anyway, I wish you a lifetime of fearlessness and fearing less. And with that, I would like to introduce Tristan Eaton. All right, come here.
Thanks, Jessica.
Come here. I just have
Good
to
job.
say a few things. Okay, so Tristan Eaton is our next speaker, a very wonderful friend of mine and one of the hardest working artists I have ever known. Truly, truly, truly. He is no stranger to Detroit. From illegal street art to the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art, Tristan has made his mark. He's built an impressive portfolio of artistic achievements. He's done iconic toy designs for Kid Robot. He's done campaign posters for Barack Obama. He's done animated TV shows for Disney. He's found his own design group called Thunderdog Studios, and innumerable commissions for clients such as Nike and Converse and Versace. I told you he's serious hard worker. His wide range of work has made him a true leader and a true influencer. He's painted murals in over 18 countries. He is celebrated. He is wonderful. He's my friend, and enjoy him.
Thanks, Jessica. I should only believe about half of what she said, but thank you. And also, can we give a round of applause to Jessica? That was really great. Thank you. And thank you to Penny Stamps and Wynwood Walls for inviting me to be here. This is cool to be back in the Detroit area. I did a little bit of growing up here. My dad is born and raised in Detroit. My mother works here at University of Michigan, Jillian Eaton. She's in the crowd. Big up. I think she has a play opening soon. Keep an eye out for that. Anyway, basically what I'm here to discuss, I was thinking long and hard about what I would talk about today. And I've done a couple talks here and there about graffiti, street art, muralism, things like that. But today, I wanted to talk about spray paint itself as a tool. And I don't think this gets talked about enough because, on the inside of this culture, we all know what it's like to, have the stigma of, a graffiti background, or to have spray paint, the tool, be criminalized, stigmatized, and misunderstood. So it's a weird thing because it makes it difficult for us to get projects off the ground. It makes it difficult for us in the street where we have to worry about police stopping us when we're doing paid murals. And culturally speaking, there's a big generation gap in our viewpoint on spray paint itself. So I want to make my case a little bit for, why I think it's a powerful tool for change and one of the greatest mediums ever for freedom of expression. But first, before getting into that, the first point I want to make, that anyone that knows me really well already knows, is that I really like spray paint a lot. It's my favorite thing in the whole world. And spray paint has basically given me a career. It's given me everything I've ever hoped for as an artist. And I think most artists spend a lot of their early life looking for a medium that lines up with what's inside them and what they want to create, that allows them to open up like a faucet and let it flow out of them. And spray paint has done that for me. It's also given me my clothing, my car, my house, everything in the world. So I have a lot to thank it for. So I'll show you guys a little bit of my work if you guys aren't familiar. You know, all the paintings that I do are freehand spray paint. I don't use stencils or tape or anything. It's just all free form, which at this point is, you know, a 50-year-old medium at this point. It's kind of like an old, you know, folk art, really, with a lot more style. So yeah, this is me working on a mural that's about 9 stories tall. To do these kinds of murals, we have to use swing stages and scissor lifts and, you know, cherry pickers. It can be pretty dangerous work, but it's the most exciting thing in the world. I get to create free public art that anyone has access to, and I typically don't really get told what to paint, so I'm able to paint whatever I want. So I hide as much weird, crazy stuff in there as I can. And you can see these murals are from all over the world. In the last few years, I've, you know, had the, you know, blessing to be able to travel and bring my art to the world in this gigantic platform. There's my girlfriend down here in the bottom to show scale. This is in Long Beach. This is one of my favorite murals. And as you can see, I think, you know, my work is a good example of the versatility of spray paint. And there's no other tool that can allow you to paint what looks like vector graphics and then switch to what looks like oil paint and, you know, switch between these visual styles effortlessly with one tool. On my paintings, to achieve the same effect on a small panel or canvas, I have to use silkscreen and brush and spray paint and, you know, everything and the kitchen sink to achieve the same kind of imagery. Right now, we're kind of in the middle of like a renaissance of mural art around the planet. And, you know, these kinds of walls, sometimes we're paid for them, sometimes we do them for free. I kind of choose my battles. Obviously, if they want you to go to Hawaii, you might, you know, forego the payment, but. This is in West Palm Beach. This is me basically, you know, pushing the limits of spray paint's capabilities in terms of scale, using a spray can to create fades and transitions in color that are, you know, 6 to 10 feet wide is extremely hard, so you got to kind of lick your fingers, wait for the wind, and then it's tough. Also, I sometimes work with assistants to pull off things of this scale, and they all hate me because I put so many circles in my pieces, and these circles are like 2 stories tall, and I'll tell you, it's really hard to do a perfect circle that big. This one I painted with my brother, also in Hawaii. You know, I feel like my collage style lends itself well towards collaboration. So yeah, it's kind of a good cross-section of my work. You can see, you know, why spray paint is, you know, or I was kind of born to use it, I feel. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. So moving on, further than it just being cool for me, I really have the strong opinion that spray paint is one of the greatest tools for freedom of expression, expressing frustration, communicating, and getting your point across ever. So right here, we can see some examples of that, some funnier than others. I think the guy in the bottom middle is a creative genius, possibly. But you know, the beauty of this is spray paint is widely accessible, it's cheap, free for someone with a 5-finger discount. You know, that happens pretty often. But you know, mass forms of communication like the corporate news media is not accessible or even a realistic platform for the poor, disenfranchised, whoever you might be, when you have something to say, and you need to say it now, and you have to get your point across, spray paint has been that tool since 1949. So what other artistic tool has had that kind of influence? I mean, nothing since oil paint or the printing press. So to me, this is monumental. And you can see the creative power it has for affecting change. You can see the words of the local people on the walls. You can see the frustration and torment people might be going through at any given time. And then moving on to the beginning of the art form I'm involved in, late 70s, spray paint gave birth to graffiti. And you wonder why that is. Well, a lot of cities didn't have proper art education. A lot of kids are disenfranchised. Late 70s, New York City was a war zone for the most part. So you have a lot of kids who were literally 16, 17. A lot of the biggest, most famous graffiti artists, Scene, Days, Hayes, you can go on and on. They were literally 16 or 17 when they became famous as graffiti artists. And a lot of these kids were disenfranchised. They wanted people to know they were alive. They wanted to get their name out there for a sense of well-being and, a sense of pride. And it's hard to deny the power of that. It really gives someone something to be proud of. Even if it's just among your small group of graffiti writers, you're still respected, and you have your community of other graffiti writers to share in this secret game to make something of yourself. Even if you're demonized and hated for it, it doesn't matter, because you did something no one else can do, and it's big, and it's beautiful, and it's public, and you're gonna sleep well, proud that night. So that's kind of a beautiful gift this art form has to give to a poor kid in the Bronx in 1970s. Further than that, out of that came people like Jean-Michel Basquiat, Keith Haring, Shepard Fairey, Futura 2000, all of these artists, Banksy, they all come out of using spray paint. And right here in the bottom right is actually Jessica's Bowery wall that she was just talking about, but that's way back in the 80s when Keith Haring painted it. Amazing. So, all of this is tied together by spray paint itself. And to me, that's really amazing and pains me to see it so stigmatized, misunderstood. So what we have now is this amazing explosion of global public art that's honestly, unlike anything we've ever seen in human history. It's the largest expansion and explosion of public art ever. And the reason for it is spray paint to a major extent, because murals of this kind of scale that you see right here by Circle on top, Case McLean and Smith, you see these ginormous murals, Ariz on the right and Fail. Spray paint allows them to paint that scale, that fast. And we're talking about 3 days to paint a 9-story mural. There's never been a generation that's had access to a tool like that. There's never been a generation capable of this. So graffiti gave birth to a generation of muralists. Right now, all around the world, we have mural festivals that are popping up in cities from Tahiti to Paris to Montreal to Hawaii to Russia to Rio. And you see murals of this scale happening everywhere. And cities and the general public are, warming up to this idea, and it's kind of a generational shift that's allowing this to happen. But in my opinion, it's not enough. All right, right here we have Howell Nazem and Shepard Fairey in downtown Detroit. And this is a good example of the hypocrisy. Shepard Fairey donated his time to paint this ginormous mural. Meanwhile, he got arrested and demonized by the Detroit Police Department and the Detroit press. And you look at the hypocrisy of what's happening globally when it comes to spray paint and graffiti. Right now, McDonald's is being sued because they covered the interior of hundreds of their restaurants with tags and graffiti. Meanwhile, if you tag the outside of McDonald's, you go to jail. So what they don't realize is that these days, graffiti artists are making money and they have lawyers and now they're getting sued. That's kind of cool. Yep. So here we go. This is what I'm talking about. You know, the criminalization and stigmatization of this artistic tool. Right here we have a different kind of tool. This is Rudy Giuliani, who, and I lived in New York City for a lot of his reign. And he is one of the biggest pushers of the broken window theory. And the broken window theory is basically a criminal theory that states, if you don't stop quality of life crimes like graffiti, public drinking, public urination, you know, toll booth hopping, things of this nature, that it creates an environment where larger crimes will happen more frequently. Now, this has been thoroughly debunked by professionals, but it's also been debunked by people like Jessica, where what we actually see is graffiti not devaluing neighborhoods and increasing crime, but we see graffiti rising property value and making parts of cities even more welcoming and more interesting to people that grew up on that kind of art, you know? And let's be honest, you know, majority of young people in the world, the only kind of art they care about is graffiti and street art. What kind of art do young people turn out for? You know, you go to a Banksy or Shepard Fairey show, there's lines, thousands of people. The young people aren't doing that for Monet. It's not happening. So anyway, I'm glad to see broken window theory being debunked because personally, I think that broken windows can be kind of beautiful, as shown here by my friend Roan. Gorgeous. And right here, you know, Wynwood Walls and, you know, the Bushwick Collective, these are examples of public art and street art raising property values. And, you know, obviously, you know, there's some backlash to that in certain ways, and the topic of gentrification comes up. That's not, I mean, that's a whole different discussion. What I'm talking about is the power of spray paint as a tool to have this kind of influence on our world in a positive way. So I'd like to change the perception and hopefully, you know, stop this kind of hypocrisy that's happening in the world. And, you know, I'll give you a really good example of why it hits close to home and why I chose to talk about this today. One of my biggest projects I've been working on my entire life. I've been working on it for about 5 years. It's called Painted Oceans. I don't have a lot of time, so I'll just go through it really quickly, but basically, I got permission from the British government to paint murals on 5 abandoned World War II sea forts. And I've been working on this for 5 years. We spent a lot of money. These are them. Just gorgeous. In the 60s, they became pirate radio stations illegally, and now that's part of their heritage. And our project basically approached the charity that are the, you know, caregivers of the forts, and through their, you know, collaboration, we raised money through Google and Airbnb and Converse and a bunch of other partners to bring the most renovation to the forts they've seen in 70 years. So in addition to painting murals on them, we would stop them from crumbling into the ocean. So basically, bringing out 5 artists to paint: Shepard Fairey, myself, Futura, Howa Nazem, and the London Police. So sounds great, right? Everyone's very excited about it. You know, global response was huge. Yet, we had a very vocal, local group of people, I'm not gonna say old people, but they weren't young, who hated the project. They called us vandals. They said we were trying to graffiti their heritage. You know, meanwhile, you know, my uncle is in the Royal Air Force, and I have family that died fighting for England in the last 2 world wars. It's my heritage too. And I feel strongly about these structures. I love them. Part of my growing up in Detroit led to my love of abandoned buildings and the idea of bringing beauty back to forgotten structures. It means a lot to me. And we were in the process of raising millions of dollars for this project, but we're stymied by local people who hated graffiti, you know, and simply because of this tool, we were demonized and cast aside, which is totally crazy. So anyway, we have some secret plan Bs I can't talk about right now. You guys can Google it and check it out. But anyway, it's a very exciting project. And you guys can see more about it online. Anyway, point of the story is, if you see someone tagging in the street, don't call the cops. Call an art dealer, ask them if they have a painting for sale. And there we go, that's my closing. Thank you, guys. Thanks.
He's just awesome. So the next person I'd like to talk to you about is a woman by the name of Kashink. The international street art scene boasts a very, very small percentage of female artists. Kashink is one of the women leading that movement as one of the most preeminent female figures. When I became CEO, I happen to be a woman, I wanted to shine a light on women artists. I wanted to really focus attention on the fact that there are an extraordinary amount of incredibly talented women out there. Because when you think of street art, most people would typically think of it as a male-dominated kind of industry. And so I started a search to find what I believed was were the greatest women street artists, and I found Kashink. She's provocative, she's creative, she's constantly challenging the status quo. She's established a recognized aesthetic with her trademark bright colors and male subject matters, which you will see. She is, by definition, a risk taker. And she's a prime example of a woman who is unafraid to take risks. And she wears a mustache. She examines gender diversity in her work, human equality, and street art as an expression for activism. She's worked all over the world. She has shown in galleries all over the world, and it is my great pleasure to introduce Kashink.
Hi, hello, hi. I do wear this mustache every single day, and this is not me. This is me. This is me painting the Wynwood Walls. I'm thrilled to be here. I just flew from Paris last night, and I'm jet-lagged, but I'm happy. All right, so this mustache, I've been wearing this mustache every single day for the past 3 years. And I'm not kidding, every single day. That means I'm going to the store with it, I take the plane with it, I go through customs with it, I get arrested by the police with it, I get mugshots with it, and all that stuff. And it's funny because it started as a joke, as a sort of a persona for openings or performances. And then I felt super comfortable, wearing it. I was I've always been eccentric, I've always been kind of funny, looking, having all sorts of colors in my hair or funny, outfits. But this mustache is a lot more to me. It's a way for me also to question aesthetic codes, why 2 symmetrical lines on a woman's face are okay here as eyebrows or as eyeliner, but if you put them in a different spot, it becomes the total opposite of what it's supposed to be. And yet, it's makeup, and makeup is supposed to, be a symbol of femininity. This is not feminine at all, so it's funny for me to question these aesthetic codes, and I do it every single day as part of my art, and I like to consider it also somehow a street art performance, like a perpetual one. So questioning aesthetic codes is part of my work, also part of my everyday life. And I don't want to be a man, I don't want to look like a man. I just want to, underline the absurdity somehow of these codes. So I started basically tagging, when I was a teenager. I would do like doodling on the streets, nothing really creative at first, but then I started, coming up with these characters that were actually inspired from my complete, attraction to masks. Masks are a tradition that exists everywhere in the world, In Africa, of course, but also in Asia for operas and all sorts of theater and stuff like that. But also in Europe for carnivals, and also, of course, in America and South America also for carnivals. So I think it's very interesting to see that the tradition is completely international, and in every area of the world it has different uses. But in a way, it's also a way to question, the absurdity of an image, and to how can I say that? Oh my God, sorry, I'm so jet lagged. Anyway, I started with these gates because they're very visible. It's super easy to go paint illegally on a Sunday morning in Paris. I still do it. And these gates, for example, this gate here is funny for me to see that again, because this is old, oh my God. But I, like Jessica said, I like to challenge, also the stereotypes. So when it comes to graffiti, of course, you don't expect a woman to be doing it. And also sometimes you expect some sort of like hip-hop background with it. And I'm more like a rock and roll background, so hence these characters with the funny pompadour that I'm sporting right now. It's funny for me because this is something that I got started with because I wanted to share my art with people. I wanted to not vandalize stuff. I wanted to paint illegally in order to share, in order to bring a little surprise in everyday, in people's everyday life. Like, you never know who's going to see your stuff. But the more I would paint, the more people would, be telling me what I was painting. Oh, I saw your stuff here. Oh, is that you who painted that other stuff there and everything? So that's pretty cool. The 4 eyes became my signature at some point because I used to paint only 2 eyes, but I painted a mural in Paris that was maybe like 7 years ago. And when I showed up to this mural again to show it to my mom, the eyes had been painted over, and the ears and the mouth, and someone had actually used my characters to talk about like a political situation in Burma, which was really bad at the time. And I didn't know how to react at first. I felt like, oh my God, someone used my art, but it's also a good cause, so what do I do? So I added more eyes in reaction to that. And now it's been my kind of like signature. So you get a dual game and try to separate the different pairs of eyes and see the 2 different expressions that these characters have, depending on which pair of eyes you're looking at. So little by little, I started also questioning the aesthetic codes in a way that I noticed that there was less women artists, but most women artists that would represent characters would represent women. And I didn't really relate to that. I had a hard time representing female figures because I thought it was really hard to break these aesthetic codes. When it comes to representing a female image, we tend to make it look perfect. It's very hard to break these codes. When we start drawing, for example, a female woman's face, we tend to put a little tiny nose and really big eyes and big eyelashes and a really big mouth. And like, it's tempting somehow because I guess we're bombarded by these images of perfect women constantly. And I think it's pretty cruel because most of us don't look like that. And so I decided I wouldn't paint women. I decided I would paint only men. And not only men, but sensitive men. So again, trying to question, the codes, because men are supposed to look tough, men are supposed to be tough, but most of you guys have a little heart, and you're all mushy. So, speaking of representing, sensitive men or breaking the codes, I decided to do one of my first solo shows. It was actually my second solo show. I wanted to really break the codes even more. And in 2011, I came up with this show called Graffiti. So Graffiti is my way to also underline the taboo that exists in graffiti, in the graffiti world. There's no gay people in graffiti whatsoever. It's a man thing, kind of virile thing, and they don't want to deal with this kind of stuff, whereas, there are some gay graffiti artists. So I decided to do this show, and as I decided to do this show, it happened that in France, a few months after, there was the first debates about legalizing gay marriage. And all of a sudden, there was these protests, and the protests were really, violent. And it was so shocking to me, because in France, we tend to protest a lot. You might have noticed that. We protest all the time about everything. Every single weekend, there's at least 2 or 3 protests, I'm not kidding. I guess it's the French Revolution heritage, I don't know. But since there was these protests, I decided I wanted to react to that, and since I had been working on this gay theme, I wanted to, emphasize on my opinion about gay marriage, and I was also shocked by the fact that we tend to protest for our rights, but never against other people's rights. It was really weird to see that happen in my country. So I painted this wall illegally for 3 days under the rain in December, and I gave it all, you guys. I gave it all. But it was just great, because I wanted that to happen right before the first big protests happened. There was already kind of people, being grumpy about this, gay marriage thing happening. And I knew that there was this protest the weekend, the day after I finished that. And I knew that they were going to march by that, So it was actually really challenging, because it was freezing and it was a lot of work. But the police didn't arrest me, and it was great. And I actually had a lot of good feedback from the people. Then I decided that year that I would travel the world. I had happened to be invited to many countries that year. That was the end of 2012, beginning of 2013. And I knew that I had already some many travels organized. So I decided I would paint a wall in that theme everywhere where I would travel. And I started thinking about an idea, a name for this project. And 50 Cakes of Gay is how it's called. I started first thinking I would paint 1 cake in every single place and just end up painting, 50 cakes. But then I showed up in West Hollywood, where this one is, still there now. And the wall was huge. I was like, all right, I'm gonna paint 50 cakes, so I'm already done with the whole number. So extra will be even better. And so I painted this one in LA, and then I painted this one in Norway, and I painted some in Austria, Germany, Spain, Greece, Morocco, so many different places where I had the chance to go. And everybody was thrilled by the idea because everybody loves cake, yeah? So it's pretty cool because for me, it was the start of something that was really meaningful. Like before that, my work was about diversity already, inspired from the masks, from all these different cultures. My characters don't really have a defined skin color. So I was already working about, thinking about messages in my work. And I was already seeing the potential of street art when it comes to sharing messages. I was thinking, might as well, try to say things, to share messages. So I came up with the idea of funtivism. Funtivism as in fun activism. And while I was doing this whole project, 50 Cakes of Gay, I got invited by Jessica for the Wynwood Walls. And I was like, all right, I'm in Miami for Art Basel. I'm going to do those cakes over there. And I painted this gigantic one here. Too bad you cannot see the scale, but it's huge. These over there and these little guys here, I'm here. So funtivism is the idea of sharing my ideas about causes that I think are really worth it and important as in terms of equal rights, but in a fun way. I think it's harder to yell a message to someone's ear and to convince them. It's hard to convince someone by yelling at them, but it's easier for me to convince people and by putting a smile on their faces, because everybody has a good memory with cake, celebrating a birthday or a wedding or whatever. So it's easier to bring empathy with this kind of symbol, which is colorful and joyful and pop and easy to understand, It's not violent, it's not hurting, it's not shocking, it's just simple, So for me, the mustache is the same. It's about, sharing simple ideas in a fun way, but ideas that are, kind of deep somehow. This is in Montreal, so I had a lot of fun painting all these cakes. And everybody loves them, and everybody loves taking selfies in front of these cakes, yoga poses and all sorts of stuff. So since I was doing this kind of funtivism work, I got contacted by people who noticed, my work, and Amnesty International contacted me last year, and I worked with them on several murals for their campaign, My Body, My Rights. That's what it says here. Mon corps, mes droits, my body, my rights. And for this specific project, I decided I would revisit classics of, the classical paintings. This is the La Grande Odalisque de Ingres, sorry. The big odalisque from Ingres. And this painting, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the woman on this painting, the original one, of course, looks so beautiful. And the painter actually added some vertebrae. I don't know if you heard about that story, but you can Google it. He added vertebrae to his model, so the back would look even better, and the skin of this character looks like it's photoshopped. So my idea was to revisit these classics by just doing the opposite of what the painter had done in the first place. Question these aesthetic codes again. So of course, all my characters, like I said, don't really have a defined skin color. They're all purple, green, blue. It was I wanted to make a point on this character, looking kind of genderless also somehow. And since Amnesty International, wanted to emphasize also on the reproductive rights, I added these little wombs there. It's so cute. And then I started thinking, because I got more and more interviews, and people kept on asking me, is it hard to be a woman in the street art world? I was like, no, not really. Anyway, it's not that it's not hard, but there's less women in arts in general. It's so easy to name like 5 male painters who marked art history, but name like 3 female painters, like Frida Kahlo, Georgia O'Keeffe, me. Anyway, what I think is that it's not only street art, you know? It's not only street art has less women. It's not only street art is harder for women. But I think it's up to us also to change that, you know, and that's what I want to do. So also, traveling abroad brought me, you know, to realize that in developed countries we realize that we have, you know, rights, even a little more than in other places in the world. I mean, as far as women are concerned, and people in general, I guess. This is in reaction to this situation where I realized I traveled to, you know, places where abortion is still illegal, or where women have no really like rights to go out by themselves, you know. It's kind of like tricky to go out. So I wanted to react to that and painted this in Paris. This is another joke I did. This is Picasso. This is the most expensive painting ever sold on an auction. And this is Les Femmes d'Alger. Was sold for this amount. I don't know if you can see it. It's like almost $180 million. And what struck me on this painting is that there's a lot of boobies, but not the typical Picasso. You know, if you're familiar with Picasso's work, he represents a lot of naked ladies, but they're all like weird and pointy and cubic, you know, and gray, or, you know, not that colorful. So I just wanted to question the aesthetic codes of what makes the, you know, this painting the most expensive in the world. Aesthetic codes, Elle China picked this photo of me after I spent the whole entire day with the photographer. Anyway. All right, funtivism again. This is my reaction to the attacks we had in Paris last year. It was rough. It happened really close to my home or my family's, I mean, my sister's home, like the Bataclan, the second attacks that happened, you know, in November. It was tough. So it was time for me also to share this message. This says peace in French. So last year, after all these attacks and after, you know, all these things we've been through, which was pretty rough, I did a solo show called Paris Chérie. And this solo show, I wanted to, you know, try new things. I was thinking, when you paint characters, there's always like a part of yourself. There's always a part of self-portrait in these characters. All my characters have this little mustache, kind of. You know, they're colorful, they're, you know, like an expression of who I am, kind of. And I wanted to personalize them, you know, to, I don't know the right term in English, but you know what I mean. This is me, and this is like, what I like is to leave also to, you know, everybody their own interpretation of my work. So this is like some sort of mixed of all the cultures that exist in Paris. And I wanted to, you know, like, be one of these characters myself by, you know, wearing this face paint. So I did a performance on stage. The show was happening in a theater, and I invited some of my friends. This is Sekuba. He lives in my neighborhood, and we did a movie together last year about our neighborhood. And we were on stage. We were like 7 people, and doing some improv about our neighborhood, about Paris, about, you know, what we love about Paris. And the show happened a month after the attacks of November. This is also part of the show. This photo was taken the day after the attacks. And it was challenging being outside, just being outside that day. It meant a lot for me because I was working on the show. I had to, do my stuff for the show. So it meant a lot to me. And I walked around all day wearing this. And again, I like to consider it somehow a street art performance. Last thing I love to share. I do things with kids a lot, participative murals, workshops. I call these kids Caching Kids. And this is a mural I organized in my neighborhood because I covered my neighborhood with my graffiti and my stuff like illegally. So at some point people were like, oh, who is that person? Like, all over the place. So I was like, all right, everybody, look, here is my stuff and everybody can, be a part of it. And this is how it looked like in the end. So it was really great. And I think, we're going through a crucial time in history right now. And, all these attacks, all the political stuff that's happening right now here and everywhere in the world, sometimes it's like we feel so kind of powerless. What can we do? It's like, it seems so absurd. And what I can do is paint walls. What I can do is share my ideas with, everybody and bring a little colors and a little messages outside, a little smile, a little something. That's what I can do. So as long as I can do it, I will, I will do it because I think it's very meaningful now that we get to share this kind of stuff, that we get to share a little something colorful and joyful. Thank you.
Nice work, nice work.
So one of our most favorite things to do after doing a wonderful program like this, I know some of you guys have class and you have to go, but for those of you that don't have class and you can stay for a little while, we're going to open up the mics and have a Q&A. We hope you've enjoyed. So
Thanks, everybody.
any questions?
But please stay for Q&A if any of you guys want to chat with us.
Yeah, we're happy to stay.
Please ask questions.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Hi. So, I don't mean to rain on. Ooh, is that me?
Headphones, maybe?
Yeah. So, I'm ambivalent towards old people, but crackheads are humans too.
I'm
And,
sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just wondering. How fair is it that your assessment of revitalizing the neighborhood is based on, for example, how many rich white people can add another art destination to their second honeymoon trip? In relation to, on the other hand, say two crackheads take a break from doing drugs to raise a child, are unable to provide for him or her. I was just wondering about your assessment.
In all the neighborhoods we've ever gone into, we have made them better from what they were. We've made them more hopeful. We've made them more beautiful. And we call it gentlification, not gentrification. So gentlification. There is always going to be an evolution to a neighborhood. And when we go in there, it's not so that we can kick out everybody else and bring in a whole new group of people. When you look at the Wynwood Walls as an example, we have everyone from a 6-year-old to an 86-year-old. We have every color, we have every background, and that's the really beautiful thing about the Wynwood Walls. And so it is challenging, and as an owner, we curate the tendencies. We want to make sure that they are startup businesses, that it's not your typical business, big, huge corporation that you can find everywhere. And it really is about creating community, and it is about making sure that the artists have a place, making sure that everybody has a place. And so I understand what you're asking or your question, but I will tell you that it's part of our DNA, my family's DNA, to improve the communities that we go into in a very holistic way.
I would also say that, I think that sometimes real estate developers that do this kind of thing can be an easy target, and they're not all the same. For me, speaking about Detroit, Dan Gilbert, if you guys are familiar with Dan Gilbert, he gets a lot of flack for the revitalization he's trying to do, but when you think about it, sometimes that kind of development is natural and going to happen anyway. Who'd you rather have doing it? Someone who embraces the arts and gives the arts a platform, or someone like Donald Trump? You know what I mean? So to me, honestly, there are, like in New York and Bushwick, you have a lot of predatory real estate developers who really seize on the street art craze as like, the point of their entry. But it's not always like that. And, sometimes the artists are the easy target because they can look as though they're the pawns of a real estate developer trying to do what you're saying. But, having worked with a lot of these real estate developers, to me, it's a godsend to have people with that kind of money and influence that give a platform to artists like myself. And a lot of us wouldn't know where we'd be without that kind of help. But obviously, the concerns you're bringing up are real. But we're lucky to have people like Jessica and Dan Gilbert who actually put art in the forefront of the development.
Next question.
So I was curious to hear you talk, if you could, about murals in the market in Detroit and the Belt and the Z-Lot. So I'm a huge fan of your work, and I've seen it in Detroit, and just to hear a little bit about how that has been part of the local movement for the art scene here.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. My brother Matthew Eaton was a big part of all of that. He used to be a partner with 1X Run, who does the murals in the market, and partner at Library Street, who did the Z Project and Shepherd's Mural and all of this. The funniest thing that I've seen as a result of it is how the local graffiti artists have responded to it, because for a long time, Detroit was kind of a graffiti vacation spot. A lot of artists would travel from all over to come here and paint. And there's a lot of great talent here. And, at first, I think a lot of local graffiti artists felt like they were being sidelined or not given enough attention. But I saw a different story. I saw a lot of them step up their game because of the talent that was coming here. And that's a beautiful thing to me. And a lot of the local graffiti artists that I know saw this coming. They saw that with the rise of mural festivals and all of this stuff, Detroit was going to be right in the map. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it's great. I lived in Detroit in the 90s downtown for a long time. And, it was crazy. And, once these murals started happening, it was like the scene in Wizard of Oz, or it went from black and white to color. And it was beautiful to see. I think it's great.
Hi, I was just wondering, I guess for all three of you, what is something I guess for just me personally and anyone else who kind of wants to get a taste of this maybe, or just dip a foot in, how you would recommend that, either still being in school or once out of school, just for you guys personally?
Well, I don't think you can dip your foot in, man. You got to dive in the deep end, dude. That's kind of the only way to do it. I mean, the only way is if you love it so much that you got to do it all the time. And that's also the only way you're going to make an impact. I mean, you could dabble in your backyard on your garage door or something, but, really it's contagious and infectious, and real quick if you're meant to do it. But, try it out, man. I mean, there's some deep, dark alleyways in Detroit where no one will see you.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would also add, explore, experiment, and, if you can find an artist that will kind of take you under their wing, help them in any way, shape, or form, whether it's whatever, and so...
That's a good point, actually. I mean, I know a lot of big artists that take, volunteers and apprenticeships.
Right.
An apprenticeship is a good thing.
Apprenticeship.
Our good friend Bo Stanton, who's currently working at the Detroit Red Bull House of Art, used to apprentice for Ron English
for 5 years.
Yeah. So that's a good way to
Immerse
learn.
yourself. Just immerse yourself.
And also, what's funny, if there is an artist who you really love and you really want to work with them for a while to learn from them, persistence is really key.
Oh, yeah.
Just never stop bugging them. They'll be like, all right, come on, come help with this project. And then, you do a good job, and they'll, be generous to you, man.
And explore. So, I love to go to different places and just kind of make a street art safari for myself and just find all kinds of places and all kinds of murals and artists, and you never know what you're going to find. The beauty of street art is that generally everybody puts their tag, so you know who they are and you know what appeals to you. And that's the beautiful thing about art, is that it's so personal, and what I might love, you might not. What you might love, I might not, but that doesn't mean that one is any better than the other. And so when you put a lot of these artists, and I think that's what the Wynwood Walls was so incredible in doing, was that it put a lot of artists together, because art, being a street artist is also, you could talk to it better than I could, but it can be a little lonesome. I mean, you're kind of going out there.
I like that about it.
Yeah, well, okay. And so, you're kind of going out there on your own, but when you come into a place, and that's why I think a lot of these festivals have been so interesting and intriguing to artists to participate, because, it really forces you to make sure that your game is up here, because you are matched with some of the other most amazing artists, and you want to make sure that you're expressing yourself in a way that you're really proud of, and that's part of leading by example. That's part of being very, very confident with who you are and what your style is, and and these two artists have a very, very particular style that is completely their own. There is no one else that does anything like Kashink. There is no one else that does anything else like Tristan. And that's to me is a very, very powerful thing.
I think you're touching on another point that's kind of interesting about all of this that I haven't really thought of before, which is that when you have these like legal public mural festivals that happen, and you have places like Wynwood Walls and other similar places, it actually gives
There are no other similar places.
the largest outdoor street art museum in the world. But what I was about to say a second ago was, be careful doing graffiti safari in downtown Detroit. Like, there were some bad things that have happened. Seriously. I know hardcore graffiti writers have been robbed for their cell phones, and there's like 10 of them. So be careful, But I guess what that made me think about is, what I was saying earlier about this art form being the only kind of art form young people really love. There's a huge world of fans of graffiti and street art, and it can be dangerous to go seek it and find it, and you put yourself at risk big time. And I guess that's a plus side of mural festivals and the public legal side of this art form, because it gives you a safer proximity to those artists and the work. You know what I mean? It's a good thing.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
This one's probably more directed towards Tristan, but being like more a graffiti writer, do you find like your tags or throw-ups still relevant in your pieces, like mural pieces, and like if so,
Yeah, man, for sure. I mean, for me personally, man, I was never really a letter guy. My spectrum was like tags and then characters. That was it, But I found that like, in New York from like 98 to like 2006, the amount of tagging I did at least gave other writers some respect for my prettier work when they found it. And they'd see a big character of mine and they'd see the tag on it and be like, oh, I saw his tag in Brownsville and Astoria and South Bronx. That guy, that's cool. And, that definitely gave a little bit more respect to the work that, it wouldn't have got otherwise. And also, there's some illegal pieces I have running since the late 90s, which is crazy to me, But it does come back in my work pretty often, you know what I mean? And I think that the thing about the natural way of painting graffiti, like, really prepares you for painting large scale, because you're painting with your whole body, man. When you're doing throw-ups and all of this, it's like, big arm work, big body work, and it kind of funnily, like I said, gave birth to a generation of muralists, so it's always relevant, man. And the way I paint characters has the same construction as the way people paint letters. There's a fill, a shadow, an outline, or an offset drop shadow on the 3D outline.
And also, both of us keep on doing illegal stuff, on the side, which is, I think, pretty,
Yeah, of course.
As far as I'm concerned, it's pretty crucial.
Yeah.
I need it,
Absolutely.
I need it.
You know,
I'm more planned with the, when I do the legal stuff these days, it's either I'm drunk and bored, or it's something very
High and bored.
planned and deliberate. It's like one of the two. It's like, it's not an everyday thing for me anymore because I'm not just a street artist or a graffiti guy, I'm an artist. So I have many other interests in painting and everything else. So, when I do illegal stuff, a lot of times it'll have a very deliberate motive behind it, or it'll be just totally drunk and madness and chaos.
What would you say to the hardcore guys out there that think murals, deed stuff, all whack?
That's fine. I'll tell you, man, I know graffiti artists that don't call themselves artists. They just do graffiti for the game. And I love that shit. And one thing that I didn't touch on in my presentation was that another reason why I think graffiti is so important, not the murals, not all of that, but one of the reasons why I think graffiti itself is so important as an art form is because graffiti artists are like the last outlaws in our culture, man. They're the last, thing we have to look to that's outside credit cards and banks and McDonald's and, monopoly houses. So that makes it, so sexy and gives it so much allure and reminds people that the world is changeable and crazy and you can, do whatever you want. People have always fantasized about, the cowboy gunslingers, the bank robbers, the mobsters. There's not much of that left, man. You know what I mean? But graffiti artists are those outlaws. So, I have so much respect for that art form because I wouldn't be here without it. But the hardcore graffiti guys that don't understand the progression of artists coming out of that, that's their own beef with, it's their own beef with themselves, man, because you can't hate on someone like Futura coming out of graffiti to do what he does. You know what I mean? Thank God for graffiti because it gave us him. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, anyway.
So we're going to take, do you have a question?
Thank you, man.
Yes. All right, thank you. And I do want to say for Tristan, that was a really well-articulated answer to the kind of gentrification issue, which I had not really thought of, kind of the idea of real estate agents being more proactive instead of against constantly. So I want to thank you for that question.
No problem.
For Jessica, I'm wondering specifically for the Wynwood Walls, which is such a dense artwork in and of itself, I'm wondering if there's any kind of differences that you felt with some projects that maybe are the difference between neighborhoods that are so dense with artwork that may end up being a little bit overwhelming versus neighborhoods that are a little bit more spaced out. Maybe kind of like the living differences between those.
Sure. So Wynwood, when we go into neighborhoods, we kind of look at the DNA of the neighborhood and we see what's there and we see how we can improve that. So you're not going to see us taking Wynwood and putting it somewhere else. And so, so Miami Beach was all about the Art Deco architecture, and Soho was about the cast iron architecture. In Wynwood, it really was not about the architecture at all, because there was nothing significant, nothing interesting, nothing historic. And so, but what was there was street art, and there was a lot of it, and a lot of it was very good, and there was some that was not that great. And so I think what we tried to do was take it to another level by setting a standard and setting a bar. And what's so interesting about Wynwood is that it's really the growth of Wynwood and the growth of the art in the neighborhood, in some cases has been very focused and deliberate, but it's also this living, breathing kind of laboratory of art. And so, yes, it's very condensed, and the area is not like this enormous, enormous area. And I think what's going to be interesting to see is how we go from a horizontal kind of format to a vertical format, because we will start, whether it's we or other people that have bought properties in the neighborhood, will start to build up. And so we've capped the height of how much we can build. We self-regulated, and so we can only build up 8 stories. We can build up to 12 stories, but really it's really about 8 stories. And so, I think that the beautiful thing about seeing such a condensed amount of art in one place is that there's tons of different styles, tons of different techniques, tons of different colors, and there is something for everybody there. And I think that you don't find that in a lot of other places. So you go to LA and there's a lot of amazing work in LA, but you really got to find your way around to find the work. I mean, even in Detroit, I was here 5 years ago with my dad, and the change that has happened in 5 years is pretty extraordinary, and the amount of artwork and and Tristan kind of brought it, was talking about it earlier, that this movement, I mean, this is a movement, this street art movement is a movement that I've never seen in my lifetime, and the acceptance of people to this art form. And I kind of start to shy away from the concept of street art. To me, it's public art. Yeah. That's really, these are artists. I mean, they happen to work on the street, but they also work, in studios and sell their work in galleries. And one of the things that I kind of came up for me earlier was the fact that I don't know how appreciative people are of the fact that there are not a lot of artists that can work on such a massive scale, and it's massive, and can also translate that into a small scale, into a 4x4 painting. It's much easier to work on a smaller scale than to work on such a large scale. And I think that, I think Wynwood is a really, really special place, and that's part of the reason why this genre of street art, because of that project, because it's changed the mindset, because you can actually go up to it and look at it closely, look at it far away. You're not driving by in a car or on a train or on a bus, and you can really, really appreciate it and enjoy it. And we keep it there for, when someone paints a mural there, we keep it for a minimum of a year, but it's generally for about 3 years that we keep the work, and then we change them over, just like a museum, because museums museums are wonderful and galleries are wonderful, but to a majority of the population, they're highly intimidating. And so creating the Wynwood Walls in a public space was a way for us to remove the intimidation factor and just bring as many people as we could possibly bring to appreciate and enjoy, that form. And, and things, and the gentrification process will happen, but I think it so far outweighs the art that we have been able to put there, the attention that we've been able to get for this art form so far outweighs kind of, any of the bad. So.
Thank you.
We are so out of time, and I'm so sorry,
getting booted.
because it's absolutely fascinating hearing you guys, and I so much wanted to ask you guys to address what you were talking about in the dressing room for Tristan and Kashink, the difference between being a man working on the street and being a woman working on the street, which was absolutely fascinating. If you could answer that in like 20 seconds, and then we have to go.
And then we can come back.
I guess, the point that I was talking about, and I can't speak for any girl artist, of course.
I will.
Exactly, perfect. But the conversation we're having was about how I travel, and I'm normally painting on the street in weird random cities, lots of times at night, and I'm talking like the favelas in Rio de Janeiro, the garrisons of Kingston, Jamaica, all over. And I get approached pretty often where people kind of test me and want to know who I am, what graffiti crew I'm with, what have you. And a lot of the times, I have to, have some kind of weapon with me to protect myself. And, I guess that spawned a conversation about that difference for a guy versus a girl painting in the streets. So that's all I was saying about it.
I don't carry a weapon. But being a woman helps sometimes because people don't feel like they need to, confront you.
If I don't feel threatened as much. Maybe,
No.
Right?
But I think it's a matter of a vibe, I would say. I don't know. That's how I feel. I paint by myself on the street, it's challenging somehow, but I don't even think about it.
Even painting by yourself, shit happens. In downtown Detroit, 2 artists got caught spray painting, stripped naked. They sprayed them completely chrome silver and stole all their clothing.
Yeah.
Craziness, it's a scary, scary activity. Especially a girl painting on her own in a dark city. You got to be brave to do it. You got to be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think about it. I guess that's why I don't think about the danger. I don't think about potential, harassment, and I think it's It's different maybe here in the US because there are weapons and it's different, but I've been painting here also many times, so I think being a woman helps also in the way that other, like artists are. Sometimes we think that other graffiti artists might, judge us or be like, oh my God, she's a woman, she doesn't deserve to be painting or whatever.
That happens to a lot of girl graffiti artists. It
It
does.
never happened to me.
Well, you know
not,
Chlor from 123 Clan?
yeah.
She loves that she gets underestimated. She loves it. Like, she thrives on it because she's so damn good
I don't
in her
really,
graffiti.
I don't really
loves it.
pay attention to this kind of stuff.
Well,
I don't let it.
A lot of girl graffiti artists get it
affect
thrown in
me.
their face because it is a very machismo, male-dominated community.
It is, but men are curious about us too.
That too.
Yeah.
And I would say that whether you're a man or a woman, talent is talent. And and that's what we need to kind of pay attention to. Yes, there are physical differences between men and women, but talent is talent. And I've
trumps
seen
everything.
some amazing work by women, and I've seen some amazing work by men. And I think that with that, we thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for having
Merci.
us.
We'll be doing illegal pieces in the back alleyway afterwards. Feel free to join us.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Let's bring it backstage. Put 'em on.